Hi, I'm so grateful that you are hanging out with me today, Kat. I found you on social media, which is your specialty, of course, and I just really liked how I felt you were being authentic in the way that you showed up, and you were just sharing really useful information for solopreneurs and entrepreneurs about how they can handle their social media. So I'm introducing everyone right now to Social Cat Media. But yeah, Kat, tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do.
Hey, thanks so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here. I am the CEO and founder and all the things of Social Cat Media, but outside of work, I'm a mom of two little kids. I live out in the country and really this like quiet life that I am trying to build is really what I'm trying to bring to social media too, because it is such a overwhelming and hectic space that I think we need to bring some of that peace and quiet to it.
Yeah, absolutely. What got you into social media? When did you realize that you wanted to make a business out of it?
Yeah, so I have a bachelor of advertising, and when I was studying advertising, I really loved learning about marketing and all the different aspects, but I really didn't love the big time advertising agency world and their beliefs and how the pressure that they put on people. So, I mean, not surprising now I live in the country that Toronto wasn't where I felt at home. So I was feeling really lost in university, liking what I was studying, but really not matching up with like the vibe of the industry. So in school I started like playing around with incorporating some social into some of the campaigns we were working on. And it seems wild because that was only about 12 years ago, but even the way like businesses used social was completely different. So I really had fun like trying to figure out how to like incorporate Twitter. Like that was one of the, the big platforms we were using at the time, incorporate it into campaigns. And from there I kind of just ran with it as like found a passion, something that I really deeply cared about and saw the potential for small businesses. And so I started exploring it more on my own, incorporating into my studies, and then, yeah, running with it.
So, what did you kind of learn from working with social media? Like, how do you find it can really help businesses the most?
The most powerful thing, I think, and really what is such a game changer for small and local businesses is the power to connect with people. Like, social media helps us break through a lot of barriers and a lot of things that like 12 years ago, we use flashback to that example, like we wouldn't have been able to connect with our customers in that way. And like as our worlds get busier and get noisier, people really want that actual connection. They don't just want marketing messages in their face all day long. So like that to me is the real power of social media.
Yeah, and that's what I feel like you're doing on social media too. Like you're keeping it real and I don't know, when I'm on your page, I don't feel like you're trying to push your services on me. So maybe even tell me a little bit about the services that you offer.
Yeah, and I think for me, there's a lot of social media education and tips and content that is geared towards online service providers. And it
Yeah.
kind of has created this like snowball or this like circular economy of service providers like talking about being an online service provider and then talking social media tips, and it's kind of just like this circle. And what I really noticed is that the small town, the local businesses who are providing their services in person or they're going to markets to sell their products, that social media advice isn't relevant to them. They don't have the capacity to post 3 times a day or to do these really extensive campaigns. They really need actionable advice that they can squeeze into that hour a week they have for social media. And I was born in a small town. I live now even in an even smaller town. That really like supporting those local businesses and the small town main streets is really where my passion is. So that's really how I've built my business over the last 7 years is working with those small town local businesses so that they can make social media work for them and not try to feel like they need to use all these tactics or these strategies, quote unquote, that like don't make sense for their business. So how I help businesses do that is through a variety of ways. I do a lot of online teaching, so workshops and different courses like that. But my baby, my favorite way to support businesses is through the Social with Kat Club, which is a monthly membership that I run. And it is like a really great wraparound support for businesses. Because I know it's like there's all these things as a business owner that we're just expected to know, right? Like every day I still feel like there's like new things, like whether it's like with your accounting or with your systems, like every day there's just something else that you're like, oh, I need to figure this out. And so when it comes to social media, the Social with Kat Club is that really comprehensive support that gives them the information they need to know, the training, the post ideas, so they can feel confident and empowered when it comes to their social.
I love that. That's awesome. Yeah. And I try to do that too with helping people as far as coming up with their marketing strategies and their brand and everything, because you're right. It is incredibly overwhelming as a solopreneur, especially like I know when I started out years ago, I had no idea what I was doing. I had no strategy. And that kind of became my own personal pain was, you know, I would put out these offers, I'd create these beautiful things, throw them out in the world, and it would be crickets because I didn't know how I was presenting it. I didn't know what I was doing. And now that became my personal way of being of service. I'm like, hey, I need to show everyone what I've done from, you know, learning through my past mistakes and failed launches and everything. And it really does become a pain point for people. And one of the easiest ways for us to give up is, you know, it's hard when we're not feeling like we're being seen or heard on social media. And especially because, we compare ourselves to like these pages with all these likes and we think everyone else is being so successful at it, but it is kind of something you just have to learn.
100%. And like, that's the amazing thing about social media is we can have these connections, we can create these communities. But I'm also very real and open with the like negative sides of social media. And I think so many people just try to push it as this like amazing thing for your business, which yes, it is. But we also need to think about like the human side of it is that as business owners, like we don't have a team handling our marketing. It's usually like it's us. It's that business owner who's the one scrolling for reels ideas or like watching people's stories. And so there is that like negative impact sometimes of that comparison. So I really focus on like, how do we balance that? Like, how do we use social media as a tool for our business, but also make sure that we have the time away from it so that we're not constantly bombarded by other people's messages, that we have the time to focus on our own messages too.
Yeah, I love that. And it's true because it can feel very overwhelming, especially when you're hearing about things changing with algorithms and everything. And you're just like standing there like, come on, like, I don't even want to be doing this. I know me personally with social media, I'm very cyclical with it, especially as a business owner. Like I have weeks where I'm on it. I love posting. I'm full of creative energy and it's great. And then I have some weeks where I can't even log on. Like I don't want to be on there. It doesn't feel good. So it's hard. But I mean, I have learned now to schedule in my content and to create content in advance, but that's taken a while to get there. So maybe you can share some tips on building a social media content strategy then. How do you build your content in advance and make it work for you?
Well, I think it's so interesting what you're saying about, you know, the flows we feel with content creation. And I think it's really easy for us to beat ourselves up when we're in those like quieter parts of it. But those parts are also really important. So there's like two things that I want to touch upon. First is I've learned so much about cycle syncing in the last year, and that's been a huge like eye opener for me, that it's really, we can't expect the same things from ourselves every every day of the month. And so when there are times when we want to, throw our phone off a bridge, it's like, what happens if we actually lean into that and we take 4 days off social? It's probably going to be a lot more beneficial than if we were just like, trudging through, like hating every second of it, because that's going to that resentment is going to build throughout the rest of the month. So like that's the one piece I want to kind of highlight, is that it's okay that there's times where it's not your favorite thing, and to see if you can start like noticing some trends. And then when it is, when you're feeling it, when you're excited, the ideas are pouring out, it's like we want to make sure that we put some space in our calendar to harness that, so that we can write down a bunch of ideas, maybe draft some captions, schedule out some posts, because it's not doable to be showing up every day with the same energy, or even showing up at all. And I think there's so much messaging online about the importance of consistency on social. And a lot of business owners take that as, I need to post, let's say 3 times a week, every week. Like that's what it means to be consistent. But there's a lot of reasons why that doesn't work for our lives and for our businesses. So I really want to help business owners like reframe what consistency means. Is we want to be showing up, we want to be providing that value to our community, but it's going to look different at different times. So sometimes if we're heading into fall now, when we're recording this, so Black Friday, holiday marketing is not that far away. And there will be times over the season where it would make sense for businesses to post more. So maybe that is adding in a couple extra posts a week, or planning a campaign over a 2-week period where you're posting almost every day, which might feel like a lot, but then you're going to balance that with times where you're more quiet, that maybe you're only posting like once or twice a week, and you're going to be showing up in your stories more, but you're letting your feed kind of rest. So for me, like that consistency piece really means about finding the times where it makes sense to really push it for your business, and the times where it makes sense to pull back for your life. And that's why like so many business owners are kind of going with the flow with social, which is a great starting point. But then you can't strategically plan for those pushes and those pullbacks, and it starts to feel completely overwhelming because it's just constant battle and a constant pressure.
Yeah, I love that. It's true. So what advice do you have in the sense of planning that content ahead? How often or how far ahead do you plan your content, and what tools do you use to do it? Do you use scheduling softwares as well for social media? Maybe could you tell us a little bit about your personal process?
For sure. So obviously I'm a digital person, but I still love a pen and paper. So I start my year, and I have this big wall calendar in my office, and I kind of map out how I envision my year going. Now the problem with paper and pen is that, now that we're going into the 4th quarter of the year, a lot of it has changed. So that's why they make whiteout and have to be flexible for those adjustments. But I think it's really great, like looking at that big picture. So whether it's the year ahead, but even just the quarter, so like the next 3 months, what are your goals? What products or services does it make sense to feature? Whether it's based on like what you're doing in your business, if you're launching something or you're rolling in a new service, obviously it's going to make sense to talk about those. But also thinking about what's going on in the world. So seasonally, are there any products or services that make sense to talk about? Are there any important days that happen in that timeline? So thinking about what's going on in your audience's lives and talking about your products or services that fit in with that. And so like on that quarterly basis, it can be a really big picture. We're not, thinking of the specific posts, but even just laying out this month or over these 2 weeks, I'm going to talk about this, is going to give you so much more peace of mind when you go to create content, because instead of like, what do I post? And basically the opportunities are endless and it's super overwhelming. You have that framework of like, I know I'm promoting this product or I'm talking about this throughout this time period.
Yeah, that's great. And do you have a strategy that you use or like a personal checklist that you kind of go through when you're creating content of, I want my content to include this and I want to try to avoid doing this?
100%. So I do love paper and pen, but my content system and basically my whole business lives in ClickUp. So that is my organizational software as well as my content strategy software. So whether I'm working on my own content or a client's content, I set up our core content, which is the main messages. So usually it's like 3 to 5 main messages or key themes that we're going to talk about throughout all our content. And with business owners, it might feel like only 3 or 5 things, like that's not a lot. But we want them to be broad enough topics that we have a variety of things we can talk about, but specific enough that people start to come to know us for that. So whether it's like certain specific tips related to your industry. So for me, I don't just share social media updates or tips. I really try to frame it in the way of how does this help us like be a human. So I call it sustainable social media. So that would be one of my core themes. So when I'm planning out content, I'm keeping in mind those core themes, that core content and how that comes into play. And then I use ClickUp to both mark what that content is. So what is the post? What core content is it addressing? Add in all those details. And that's where I really build out my content calendar and then schedule it directly, sometimes through Instagram or through Plan is the scheduling tool that I really love.
Cool. Yeah. The scheduling softwares are incredible. I use Metricool and it was just the biggest game changer once I started using it because I spent embarrassing how many years, but I'm not even going to say how many years I would spend like manually uploading each post to each platform, even if it was like the same post going across all platforms. And it took so much time, especially when I was uploading like little YouTube videos and Instagram videos. So the scheduling software, that's like I recommend using that to everyone just because it saves you so much time. And it is nice when you can look at it as like a calendar breakdown and see what you've got coming up that week. So I'll know, when do I want to go on and engage with my audience and stuff like that after I've posted. So that's great. What posts can you recommend? I think is Instagram like your favorite platform to show up on?
Yeah.
Yeah. What posts do you find do the best for you on there, and which ones have you kind of not had as much success with?
Well, it's really interesting. We talked earlier about like comparison. And so for me, I would see other social media or marketing people posting about Instagram updates and like very, very like newsy, like here's what's new and kind of just sharing that information. And I felt like I needed to do that. Like if I'm going to, be a social media professional, I need to make sure I do this. So for a while I was trying to do that. Like anytime Instagram had a new feature or function, I'm like, okay, I need to stop what I'm doing, go create a post. It was stressful for me. Those posts never were my top performing posts. So it was really helpful. And it's something that I recommend all business owners do is look at what you've already created and look at the results of it, but also try to see like, how did that post make you feel when you were creating it? Because that's always like the balance of what does our audience enjoy and what do we enjoy creating as a human. So trying to find that balance is really key. So for me, I find my audience resonates with some of the content that I feel most compelled to talk about, which is a great synergy. So when I talk about like sustainable social media or just like the struggle of being a business owner and a mother, like pulling back the curtain on what it means to be those two titles, that's really where I find the biggest impact in my content. And that's something that is one of my core content themes, because it's something I think we need to talk about more in the world in general.
It's true. The motherhood thing. I mean, like, we both have two young kids, they're very similar in age, toddlers, early young kids. And you know, that's become my purpose in working for myself and leaving the corporate world and taking the leap is I know the life that I want to have and how I want to raise them and the freedom I want to have and how I want to be able to be involved in that and make my own schedule. And it is the biggest motivator for me, but it also is like really hard too at the same time. Like there's so many days where I fantasize about, you know, giving up on entrepreneurship and just going and getting a traditional job because it would seem easier at times. But then it's like, but no, wait, like there's just so much more to come from it. And the examples we're setting for our children as well, them watching us create something from nothing and manifest our own life. So I think that's amazing. But yeah, I with the whole social media thing, I just think it really does become a huge block for someone because it really is a job in its own. And that's kind of like the most common thing I get from solopreneurs and you know, they want to show up on social media. They have all these big, massive ideas, but then it's like, but you need someone who can edit the reels. You need someone who can create beautiful designs in Canva or something. Like there's just so many more moving parts to it. So if you were really talking to somebody who was just starting out, they don't have that tech experience and they're wanting to show up on social media, what is like the most simple, easy way for them to build a new profile and grow an audience?
Well, it's so interesting that you said that, because I was just talking at a workshop last week about the like amount of things that fit under social media. So like even when we think about Instagram, just like you're saying, there's reels, there's graphics. You have to optimize your profile. You're showing up in stories. Like there's multiple pieces underneath one platform. And then if we think about going on more than one platform, it just snowballs. And so the first thing I want to say to business owners is that like they're not doing anything wrong if this is feeling like a lot. It is a lot. And I think part of it is through the history of social media. It really was built as this like in the moment, let's, you know, share a quick thing. And so that like inherent belief of social media, I think, has stayed with us. And we're almost like expecting ourselves to be able to create that quote unquote quick reel or let's whip up a graphic. But when it comes to marketing our business, it does take time. And so we need to first just like accept that and make a plan for that. So the first thing I always recommend solopreneurs, business owners do, whether they're just getting started building their social or they've been on there for a while, is set aside the time in their calendar. Because when social, if like we're expecting it to just be, I'm going to do something real quick, it's going to be great, that's where we can start really that like frustration building or that resentment building, and it's just going to be a more negative experience. So I always say, like, even if it's 1 hour a week, putting that in your calendar, just like you would put an appointment, and like showing up for that time for your business. So using that time to create content. And that first time you do it, you might create one post in that hour. But as you keep working at it, soon you're going to be able to create your content for the week in that hour. So it's really important to like hold yourself accountable to that time and know why you're doing it. That this is so that later on in the week, you're not having to worry about social or stress about it at the same level, because you know you have that foundation taken care of.
I love that. Yeah. It kind of reminds me, like, that's a lot of my strategy too, is I've built like this kind of like a content bank. So I have like a bunch of B-roll and all this stuff to work with on my phone. So like you said, you feel like in the moment you kind of want to post, but the stuff that we're seeing is never in the moment. Like, on a Monday morning, you'll see me post a video of me chatting full hair and makeup, and I'm looking great and happy. Well, it's like, that was like recorded a week or two ago, and like I'm currently in a messy bun chasing around toddlers. Like that's not me in the moment. So I think that can be misleading too, like what you just said. I think that's a really good point. If we're trying to keep up and we're feeling like, we're out and we need to capture something, we need to post it right away, that really can cause a lot of anxiety. Like I love having like an inventory of content to work with, and then, schedule it out as needed, and building a plan around that. So that's great. What's your most effective marketing strategy as a business? Like, I mean, of course you're using social media, but how do you find that you get clients? Like how do you grow your business?
For me, it's like that balance of when I'm talking about my business. So for me, really important to talk about that human side, and the way that I talk about my experiences in motherhood and business ownership. So like I'm very open about my struggles in the postpartum period after both my kids. And actually, if we like flash back and talk about that comparison piece, I had my first child in 2018. I had already been in business for about a year and a half full time, working on social. None of my friends had kids yet. I was the first of my family and my husband's family to have a kid. So the only messaging or information that I saw about parenthood was from Instagram and Pinterest, which is a very dangerous place to get the information from. So for me, my kind of expectations going into motherhood was, okay, like I'm gonna have this beautiful nursery, I'm gonna have this baby that just like sleeps in their bassinet, and I'll just like work. I took a 2-week mat leave when I had my daughter, which
wow,
yeah, not recommended.
That's intense.
Yeah, so for me, it's really important to like incorporate that story, because a lot of my community are mothers, so they can relate to that in different ways, but also just like that idea of parts of what we're doing is hard, and like that is okay in a sense. Like we're not doing anything wrong if it's hard, and talking about the positives and the downsides of social media in a way that resonates with business owners who are feeling similar, whether it's about parenting, business ownership, social media, like those complex feelings. So I think that relatability and the honesty has been really, really a powerful tool I've used to grow my community. And I'm really like proud of some of the conversations that have come up with that. Like one time I went and met with a local client in person, and she was a woman, like a middle-aged, her kids were grown, like young adults their own. And I had recently shared a post about needing to go to the hospital for mental health support after my second was born, because I basically just wasn't sleeping, and I needed some help in that sense. And she shared with me, she's like, I really appreciated your post. I struggled so hard after my kids were born, and no one talked about it, and it was not something. So like to me, like obviously growing my business is important and connecting with new clients, but to me that's like almost just as important is letting people know that they're not alone, and using parts of my story to connect with people.
I love that. And it's true, because I think the more authentic we are when we're showing up anywhere, the more we're just going to attract what's in alignment with that too. Like what you said about you taking that strategy initially of trying to post videos that you thought you had to post, I've done the same thing, and they do perform like absolute garbage. Like nobody's interested, and even I'll go back and watch it later, and I'm like, yeah, because that wasn't me. I wasn't being real. I was just sharing what I felt I had to share, and that you're right. Like that human. I love what you're saying about that human aspect of being real, because I've had the same thing, like where I share things that are kind of off strategy sometimes, just being more open and honest, you do get those nice messages in return from people who can really relate. It's funny, like we all really are going through our own personal struggles, and just kind of showing up like, hey, like thinking that no one else is going through it, but we all have something.
I think there's this like pressure, or we feel this pressure to make everything perfect and like curated on social, and especially like a more curated platform like Instagram. And even 5 years ago, that was definitely like everything was highly edited. People's feeds were all like very light and bright, and the perfect. I like to go scroll back through my Instagram and see this, the stock photos of the coffee on the desk, and those performed like well in terms of engagement, people liking things like that, but they weren't actually putting out any real like meaning into the world. So it's really important to think about, yes, your products and services and how you share those with your community, but also like who you are as a human and what parts of your story are going to resonate with them. And I'm really passionate about pulling in some of those personal pieces into your social media strategy for your business, but also making sure that there are those boundaries in place. So I'm not telling clients, you need to be posting photos of you and your kids on the weekend, or talk about like your childhood or anything like that. It's really about honing in on a couple pieces of your story that are really true to you and incorporating that throughout your content. So like I talk about motherhood and entrepreneurship a lot on social, but I have my own boundaries around that. So I don't share my kids' faces or names on social. So even I can still protect their privacy, feel comfortable with what I'm sharing, but still connect with people even without, sharing everything.
Yeah, I do the same. Like I also don't want to share my kids on social media, because for me it just doesn't feel like, I want it to be their decision, I guess, if they want to be shared or not. But yeah, I agree too with what you said about like wanting to post those picture perfect images and everything, and the comparison, and it can be a lot. But I like the fact that people now and the algorithms are now starting to favor more of that like user generated content and stuff that's not like a 4K video that's perfect and probably costs $5,000 to produce with the web team or video production team. So it's good. And I think it's good when we can try to be more authentic too, and people like yourself sharing the real stuff. Like I know with me, I have a big block with video where there's like, I'm like, oh, I've got to like do my hair and makeup before I can record something. Meanwhile, I'll be sitting there with like a really good idea, and it would probably benefit me if I just went live on my phone and just talked about it, just looking how I do in the moment. But those are like our own personal blocks that we have to try to overcome. And it's good though. I love when I see people who are being real. It means a lot to me.
I always try to tell clients to treat especially new things as an experiment. And I think it feels like there's like, sometimes we need all these rules around social about what am I posting, when am I posting, how am I posting it. But we also need to like remember that these platforms are not living and breathing, but they're always adapting. And so what works one week isn't going to be the same as the next week. So we need to have that ability to experiment and a little bit of that like curious mind of like, I wonder what would happen if I posted this. And in summer 2024, Instagram has rolled out the ability to make carousels in the app and add text directly. So it's a really fun way to make some of that content that feels really organic to Instagram. Like it's the same fonts that you're seeing in someone's stories or on their reels. And that is like one thing I'm really encouraging business owners to try right now is to like grab some photos from their camera. So like not professional photos, whether it's a weekend photo dump or photos that represent your team from the last couple months, and create those as a carousel right in Instagram and just see what happens. Treat it as an experiment. One thing that's like trending right now is like sharing your dopamine menu. And so I've seen some really cute carousels that are photos from their camera roll, whether it's, their coffee at a local coffee shop or going for a walk. Like those are all examples of how you can share who you are as a human outside of you as a business owner in a really quick and simple way.
I love that. I love that. Now, before we finish this conversation, could you share kind of your day to day with us too? Like, I love hearing how other entrepreneurs schedule their lives because a lot of us are not doing that traditional 9 to 5. So can you, tell us a little bit about that? When do you work with people in your membership? When do you do all that stuff?
It's so interesting because for a long time, I thought that to be successful as a business owner, I needed to work 9 to 5. That if I could like check in and check out, that would be like, I've made it as a business owner. And so for a lot of years, I really felt that like pressure. But in the last year or so, I've really embraced this idea of flow. And I don't believe in work-life balance because I think that's like unattainable. But just like with like consistency with your content, it will ebb and flow. Like I find the same thing with like work and life is sometimes I will need to work more and other times I will be with family more. So I really try to incorporate that in my week to week. And so like, for example, when we're filming this, it's the last week of summer and we are going to be doing lots of family things. So I actually worked yesterday, which was a Sunday in the afternoon, and got basically a day of work done in the afternoon, got up early this morning to finish it up so that I can have a couple days off this week. And so I really find that every week is different, but bringing in that idea of like scheduling time for social, like that's the piece that's like the non-negotiable for me. Personally, like if I didn't schedule my content in advance, I would post maybe like twice a year because I would just get overwhelmed by it, or I would not have the time. So my Mondays are always my business day where I am working on content, updating strategies for myself, planning things out. And that allows me to start my week feeling really like at peace, knowing those like fundamentals are taken care of. And then I find the rest of the week, depending on the season, will flow differently. But generally I like work most of my work hours like when the kids are at school. So usually I finish my day a little bit before 5, like an hour or so before 5. And then sometimes I'm picking up a little bit of that extra time in the evening or on the weekend, depending on our schedules. And I've really embraced that idea of flow. And like, there's nothing wrong with working at night if I want to. And if that means it allows me to live other parts of my life in other parts of the day.
Yeah, I like that. It's kind of similar for me too. Like I really work when it's convenient for me, and I've deliberately built my whole business model around being able to have that flexibility. Like I used to book one-on-one appointments with people all the time and stuff. I had to stop doing that because I'd have moments where my kids would be screaming and I couldn't do it. I couldn't show up at that specific moment. And same thing. I used to have the same mentality of thinking I had to work so much harder as an entrepreneur. I thought, okay, if I'm choosing to work for myself, it means I have to work twice as hard. Well, it's actually not really totally true. Like we really can have more freedom. And there's a lot of time being wasted at these corporate 9 to 5 jobs. Like, seriously, I worked one for a long time, and I probably spent about actually like 2 to 3 hours of the day working on stuff, and the rest was just meetings, people coming to your desk, distractions, what are we doing for lunch, and all these other things that happen. So I think when we do get into a workflow, like an actual focused, doors locked, toddlers are not coming in screaming and asking for snacks flow, we really can, especially as moms, like we've learned how to multitask. And like, I feel like I'm in my peak performance as a woman right now because of the fact that I have toddlers and I can handle so much, and there's so many moving parts around me at all times. Really can get a lot done in an hour or two.
Yeah, and that's like when I think like about that hour for social as the example, a lot of business owners are like, oh, it takes me an hour to make one post. I don't think like, how is putting it in my calendar for an hour going to help? But it's like, it takes you an hour because you are scrolling reels, and then you're like making dinner, or you're doing laundry, and like or you're checking your email at the same time. There's all these other pieces. It's like when we can have that dedicated time for it. I love like using the Pomodoro method. So like I have a visual timer on my desk.
Awesome.
Very similar to the visual timers that I use with my toddler. But my brain likes that. Like for these 35 minutes, like no distractions, no opening up Instagram, no just like checking my email. It's like, this is what I'm working on, and then go take a break and come back. Really works for my brain.
I love it. I love it. Well, thank you so much, Kat. Can you just share too, before you go, where people can find you, and maybe could you just tell us a little bit more about your membership that you're offering too?
Absolutely. So I am chronically online at Social Kat Media on Instagram, and that's Kat with a K. And I love connecting with people in the DMs there and chatting and getting to know the real human behind the business. And then my membership, the Social with Kat Club, as I mentioned, is really a wraparound support for business owners who are running their own social media. So in it, we do a monthly Q&A call every month. So it's an opportunity to get that feedback on your content, ask your burning questions. We also have a Slack channel. So we talked about the flow of managing life and business. I love the Slack channel because then I can, after I put the kids to bed and I'm watching Netflix, I'm in there answering questions and sharing different ideas. So I love that opportunity to connect with the community. We also do a monthly workshop, so an opportunity to dive deep into different social media topics. And we talked about how it feels like there's all these different things that we need to know. So that's the opportunity to really feel confident and educated about all those different Instagram and social media and marketing topics. And then every week you get trending reels in your inbox, and they're customized for those small town, local community-based businesses. So taking what's trending and making it accessible and usable for small businesses. So ideas, examples, the text you should include, and all that good stuff.
Awesome. That sounds very valuable. That sounds great. Yeah. Thank you. Well, thank you for sharing your world with us, and for all of this helpful information. And I'm looking forward to continuing to watch you on social media and see everything that you're putting out there, because I love what you're doing, and I'm really grateful that you took the time to chat with us today.
Oh, I appreciate it so much. It was so lovely connecting with you.
Yeah.